Georgia at Ole Miss is the Saturday 3:30 Eastern game on ABC, and it is the moment of truth moment for both of these teams. It's not an elimination game. We're not going as far as to call it that, although it probably is for Ole Miss. I wouldn't call it that for Georgia. But last year, this game happened. It happened in Athens, and it was a splattering. It was a Sarah McLachlan special. It was a body bagging. It was 52-17 Georgia. So how much could have changed over the past year? It's one of the dumbest questions we ask in college football. Routinely, we see blowout results from one year flip entirely the next year. I remember OU Texas 3 years ago, Texas in a blowout, and then last year OU beats them outright, and everybody leading up to the game had been like, well, can you really make up that much ground in 1 year? Yes, we score in 3s and 7s, and 25 to 30% of your roster gets overturned every year. Yes, it can happen. Point blank, yes, it can happen. Now, what does Ole Miss need for it to happen? Georgia's favored by 2.5 here, so we're not talking about any kind of massive upset. But Georgia has scored 30-plus in 5 straight. Like, as much as people talk about them struggling offensively, and they've had their issues, they're still hanging 30 or more every game. I'm going to assume they're in that neighborhood here. So my working theory is Ole Miss needs to be into the 30s to win this game, and if I'm wrong, but that's what I assume. Georgia also has scored 30 in 7 of their last 8. So that's the neighborhood they're in, even with the struggles. Carson Beck, by 10 miles, is the most important player in this game. I had Jesse look this up. Carson Beck's first 17 games, paper popper of a stat here, 31 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. That was his first 17 games. His last 5, 10 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. He's nearly thrown twice as many picks in his last 5 games as he did his first 17 games. So if you're listening but you haven't watched a lot of Georgia, you must think shame on that offensive line. Georgia's offensive line is top 10 in the country in pressure rate allowed. It's not that. He just doesn't see the field well. And it sounds like we're talking about a true freshman. It's not. I just told you, he's done it before. We've seen him do it before. He's just not doing it right now, which is the most mind-boggling part of it all, because that's the one where even your coaching staff's sitting there scratching their head on Sunday. I know it's there. I keep sitting here waiting. I'm terrified to pick against Georgia because I keep waiting on that one Carson Beck game that I've seen before where he just goes off and he's the player of the game, and Georgia's they beat someone into a coma, and you're like, I can't believe I picked against them. But it's not happening. So who knows? Maybe it happens this weekend. Ole Miss defense, number 2 versus the run, and they're in the 90s versus the pass. So the profile of Georgia lately is they have not run the ball well, and they've tried to throw the ball, but Carson Beck hasn't been all that great at it, although he has shown the ability to in the past. And if that's your standard operating procedure here, it's there. It's there to be had against Ole Miss. You just got to make it happen. Georgia ran. Jesse, is this right? Georgia ran for over 300 in this game last year. So that's not them this year. Georgia ran for like a quarter of a mile, maybe even half a mile in this game last year. I promise you one thing. So you're looking at the stat profile if you're watching on YouTube right now. Rushing yards per game, Georgia is 97th in the country. They're just not running the ball well. But I will promise you this. This will always be the case with a Kirby Smart team. I don't really care what they have been. They go into big games like this, they will commit to running the ball. Now, they may not be great at it, and they may have to adjust in game, but there is no contest that Kirby Smart's going to take a team into where he says, we're not really worried about running it so much today. Forget that. We're just going to have to throw the ball to win the game. They will try and run the ball. And if they can't, they can't. But it has to be there. You got to ask your guys. You got to look at Trevor Etienne if he's ready to go. You got to look at Nate Frazier. You celebrate the way you want to if you get in the end zone, as long as you get us there. I'll yell at you, I'll scream at you, but if you can run it for 4.5, 5 yards per carry, then we can ride you to a victory Saturday. It's got to be there. This is Georgia. I don't care what the stat profile says. I don't care that you're 97th in the country. You've got to look at your guys and say, you've got a G on your helmet. Like, you're wearing the red and black, or you're wearing the white and silver, I guess, on the road. We don't accept being in the 90s in rush yards per game. And in this kind of game, the fate of your season could rest on you finding extra yards and fighting through tackles. It's just, you've got to throw the stat profile in the garbage, is what I'm saying. You've got to be committed enough to it where Ole Miss can't stop you with 4 and then just shut you down or wait for your quarterback to throw the ball to him, because that will happen if you allow that to happen. Ole Miss can win this game on third down, too. We were looking at this earlier. Georgia's 90th in converting third downs, and Ole Miss's defense is top 10 in the country. A lot of this stat profile, guys, I got to be honest with you, it leans Ole Miss. It leans fairly substantially Ole Miss. But Georgia's defense is what I learned I was able to still count on in the Texas game, and it's what I should still be able to count on in this game. They're top 30 in rush and pass. Like, they're there. They're one of very few teams that are top 30 in both categories. They do not allow explosive plays. This is actually the stat of the game. I'll give you an advanced sort of paper popper stat of the game. Ole Miss's offense is near the top of the country in creating explosives, and Georgia's defense is top 5 in preventing them. And that brings us to what the model thinks versus what FanDuel thinks on this game. Because right now, as we talk, and it's late in the afternoon on Tuesday, Georgia's favored by 2.5. The model thinks the wrong team is favored. The model likes Ole Miss minus half a point, which, as we all know, is impossible to happen, but raw power rating, that's how it calibrates it. Ole Miss, it's an interesting stat here. They've allowed more sacks in their 2 losses, the Kentucky game and the LSU game. They allowed more sacks in those 2 losses than all 5 of their wins. We saw Georgia against Texas. They got home in a big way. They affected the quarterback in a big way. If they do that here, Georgia's going to win. I think this is the circle game for Ole Miss. It's the one ever since they flew home from Athens last year that they understood would define them as a team this year. And they've already lost 2, and that's okay. That just means their back's against the wall. I don't think Ole Miss is losing this game. I think somehow they'll find a way to win it. And I actually agree with the model. I think our folks at FanDuel probably still have Ole Miss a little underrated. I think the AP still has Ole Miss a little underrated. That is a very dangerous team. And in years past, that'd be okay because I trust Georgia. Just like in years past, I trust Bama to go on the road against LSU and take care of business. I don't trust either one of them to that degree this year. And so if I've got a wounded animal at home in total survival mode and they're able to exploit your weaknesses, just conventional wisdom, I'm going to ride with them. So I'm taking Ole Miss to win this game outright.